Before we already discussed about why Satoru Gojo did not become evil even though he was very strong, and also we once discussed about why Suguru Gato turned into evil in Islamic perspective. This time we will enter into a discussion that is much more interesting and even a bit surprising for some people. Because in one of the important scenes in Jujutsu Kaisen, we can find a teaching that is very fundamental in Islam, namely Tawhid. Correct, Tawhid, the belief about the one God, the only one, no two, no comparison. And this appears explicitly in the dialogue of Megumi Fushiguro when he summons his strongest Shikigami, namely Mahoraga. For fans of Jujutsu Kaisen, this scene must already be very familiar. Megumi, with a body full of wounds, stands tall, then utters a summoning phrase, which in the subtitle is translated as a call to the one almighty God. And after that, Mahoraga appears, the Shikigami that even he had never been able to control perfectly. Many people may think that it was just a cool dialogue, or just a fantasy term used by Akutami Geges, the writer of Jujutsu Kaisen. But if we look deeper, it is very clear that there is a big message we can take. Because the fact is, this is not just a style of language. This is not just dramatic spice. This is a recognition of a great concept that exists in almost all Abrahamic religions, namely the oneness of God. And if we speak in Islamic perspective, this is the essence of all essence. Tawhid is the first foundation. All teachings, all worship, all sharia, all deeds ultimately return to the belief that there is no God but Allah. Now, let's take a step back. Megumi Fushiguro is one of the most important characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. Unlike Yuji Itadori, who is reckless and emotional, or Satoru Gojo, who is confident and sometimes playful, Megumi is more calm, more thoughtful, and often guided by a sense of justice. When he uses his Tengen Shikigami technique, he can summon divine beings, and the ultimate one among them is Mahoraga. But summoning Mahoraga is no joke. In the story, it is said that no one has ever tamed this Shikigami. It always destroys its summoner. The ritual to call Mahoraga involves chanting words that invoke divine authority. And here's where things get super interesting. The phrase that came out was basically like an Islamic Tawhid statement. That is why so many fans on the internet, especially Muslims, were shocked and started asking, wait, did Jujutsu Kaisen just drop a Tawhid reference? It means you recognize that power, destiny, and control belong to only one God, not many, not divided, not shared. And here's the connection. In the anime, Megumi, even with his skills, cannot control Mahoraga by himself. He has to call upon divine authority. That reflects the idea that human power has limits. No matter how strong, clever, or trained you are, there are realities beyond your reach. The only way to face them is by connecting to a higher authority, the one God. Well, Jujutsu Kaisen, through this scene of Megumi, very boldly and explicitly presents the sentence of Tawhid. Meaning, unconsciously, this anime teaches Tawhid to millions of viewers around the world. Maybe the author did not intend it like that. Maybe the subtitle translator also did not intentionally present such a strong Islamic nuance. But this is where the interesting part lies. Because in religious tradition, there are always traces of revelation that remain. Now, let's go deeper into the meaning of Tawhid. Many scholars, like Karen Armstrong in her book A History of God, explained that all religions, at their root, came from one tree, the belief in a single supreme being. Over time, cultures shaped different rituals, images, and symbols, but deep inside, there was always this idea of one divine source, That's why you see similarities. In Norse mythology, there is Heimdall, the guardian who blows the trumpet to signal the end times, which reminds us of the Islamic angel Israfil who will blow the sur. In Shinto and Buddhism, people step outside the temple and bow to the sky when praying, recognizing that statues are not the ultimate god, but merely symbols. Many people think Shinto is polytheistic, only filled with worship of thousands of kami or spirits. But if we study deeper, in Shinto teaching there is actually a concept about one supreme entity, source of all kami, although not always mentioned explicitly. And Shinto people, when they pray at the shrine, they are not worshipping statue or physical object. That statue is only a symbol, medium, reminder. They still acknowledge there is one divine power greater. Then in Buddhist tradition, even though often considered not focused on concept of God, actually there is also recognition of a single transcendent power. Even in daily practice, many Buddhists still direct prayer to one supreme God before then honoring the bodhisattvas. So, when Jujutsu Kaisen drops a line about the one God in the context of summoning Mahoraga, it echoes this universal truth. It is as if the story is reminding us, behind all these myths, curses, and shikigami, there is a fundamental recognition of the divine unity. All this points to one thing, that Tawhid, or recognition to the one God, is a universal foundation in human soul, and Jujutsu Kaisen, whether consciously or not, managed to slip that through Megumi. Now let's discuss more specifically about Megumi and Mahoraga. In the story, Megumi's Shikigami is an inheritance technique from Zenin clan, namely Ten Shadows technique. Mahoraga is the strongest Shikigami in this technique, and even in history, no Ten Shadows user has ever fully mastered it. So when Megumi summons Mahoraga, it is a moment of sacrifice, as well as recognition that there is power greater than himself. Well, this recognition is what makes the dialogue feel so Islamic. Because in Islam, we are taught that all true power comes only from Allah. Humans cannot rely solely on their own strength. Even Satoru Gojo, known as the strongest sorcerer, in the end failed to save his friend Sugu Rigeto. Why? Because guidance is not in the hands of humans, but in the hands of Allah. Same with Megumi, who knows that to be able to access Mahoraga's power, he must submit. He must acknowledge higher authority, namely the one almighty God. So we can conclude, Jujutsu Kaisen indirectly teaches Tawhid to its viewers. Through a story full of action, battle, and sacrifice slips a message that above all human power, there is always one single power that cannot be matched. Now, if we draw into religious context, this is very interesting. Because as I said earlier, all major religions originally came from the same tree. That tree is Tawhid. Religions can branch, can have different names, can have different rituals, but the root remains the same. In Japan, even though the majority of people do not formally claim religion, they still have spiritual traditions that recognize something greater. And when works like Jujutsu Kaisen present a sentence about the one almighty God, it is like reviving ancient human memory about Tawhid. This also explains why anime, manga, or Japanese fictional works often present concepts that feel similar with Islamic or Abrahamic teachings. Because basically, those writers unconsciously are digging back universal values that have been planted in human souls since the beginning. We can see the example in another anime, like Shumatsu no Valkyrie or Record of Ragnarok. In it, Heimdall blows the trumpet to start the apocalypse war that is very similar with the concept of Israfil angel in Islam, and this shows that ideas like this are not coincidence. That is collective memory of humanity about revelation once revealed. Well, back to Jujutsu Kaisen. If we pay closer attention, Actually, there are many moral values aligned with Islamic teaching. For example, about sacrifice, about friendship, about justice, about fighting desires, all of that exists in Islam. And the scene of Megumi summoning Mahoraga by mentioning the one almighty God is the symbolic peak. If we reflect, this is a reminder for all of us that no matter how great humans are, no matter how smart the strategy, no matter how strong the technique, in the end there is one point where we must acknowledge limitation. And at that point we find Tawhid. We acknowledge that only Allah is the true power. So, for friends who watch this anime, do not underestimate that scene. Do not just see the coolness of Mahoraga appearing with terrifying aura. Look deeper. That is a moment of Tawhid. That is Islamic teaching slipped in the middle of the story. And this proves that Islamic message is truly universal. It can enter anywhere, even into popular shonen anime. And maybe this is what makes Islam so relevant throughout ages. Because the core of its teaching is not about certain culture, not about certain nation, but about something that exists in human nature. Everyone, in any part of the world, will eventually arrive at recognition that there is one God who controls everything. So, the conclusion is clear. Jujutsu Kaisen teaches Tawhid. Through Megumi Fushiguro and Mahoraga, we are given the message that the true power only belongs to the one almighty God. And if we draw it more broadly, this reminds us of Islamic teaching, while also showing that all religions actually root from the same tree, namely Tawhid. That's the discussion this time. If you agree, please write your opinion in the comments. And if you have another theory, don't hesitate to share. Because in the end, discussions like this are not only about anime, but also about how we can find spiritual values in modern fiction works. Thank you for watching until the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because there are still many other interesting contents we will discuss. See you in the next video.